Picture a man stepping into a damp cell in the Tower of London. The torchlight flickers against the stone walls as he runs his hand along a row of manacles, almost lovingly, before selecting a pair and turning with a faint smile. His name is Richard Topcliffe, the Queen's self-proclaimed chief interrogator, and the man that Catholic priests prayed to never meet. His reputation in Elizabethan England was enough to silence even the bravest recusants. Yet this was no shadowy thug. Topcliffe was supposedly a gentleman. He was a member of Parliament. He was a landowner. And in his mind, he was a loyal servant of Elizabeth. Over time, his name would become shorthand for cruelty. He's appeared in fiction from Elizabeth R. to Roy Clement's John Shakespeare thrillers, but the real Topcliffe was far darker than any dramatization. So my friends, settle in, get comfy, grab a beverage, and join me in discussing one of the worst villains of the Tudor period. Hey friend, welcome back to the YouTube channel for the Renaissance English History Podcast. I am your host, Heather. I've been podcasting on Tudor England since 2009 with my show, which makes it the original Tudor History Podcast. I am just so pleased, so delighted that you are here with me today to talk about a serious villain in Elizabethan England. Seriously, if you know any redeeming qualities about this guy, you have to let me know in the comments because he just seems like a real piece of work. I've been reading the John Shakespeare mystery series by Rory Clements. 10 out of 10 would recommend for sure. And he's in there as the villain. And so I wanted to read up some more on him. And dang, he is just awful. I don't see any good in him. But I mean, we'll talk about it, right? So let's dig in. Richard Topcliffe was born on November 14th, 1531, into a world of privilege and ambition. He was the oldest son of Robert Topcliffe in Somerby in Lincolnshire, and his mother, Margaret Burr, was linked to some of the most influential Tudor families. Her father, Thomas Burr, had served as a chamberlain to Queen Anne Boleyn. Her brother, Edward, was Catherine Parr's first husband. So through them, Topcliffe's bloodline wove directly into the circles of Henry VIII's wives and courtiers. My hair is stuck in my face. Anyway, at 16, he entered Gray's Inn, one of London's great legal societies, though he showed zero interest in actually becoming a lawyer. He had the education and the polish of a Tudor gentleman, but his ambitions were less about law and more about power. When he came of age, he inherited over 4,000 acres of land, enough to just live comfortably for life. But comfort was not what this guy wanted. By his own account, he entered Elizabeth's service as early as 1557, before she even wore the crown. And for the rest of his life, he liked to describe himself as her personal agent, her hand of justice, her sword against treason. It was an unusual obsession for a man of such privilege, born to wealth, educated, connected, yet consumed by the hunt for Catholic traitors. To understand his rise, it helps to remember the tension that was gripping England in the 1560s. Elizabeth's reign was young, her throne was insecure. The Northern Rebellion of 1569, led by Catholic nobles seeking to restore the old faith, they actually performed a mass in Durham Cathedral, rattled the government. The Pope's excommunication of Elizabeth in 1570 only deepened the paranoia. Plots to overthrow or assassinate Elizabeth seemed constant, and anyone with Catholic sympathies was a potential conspirator. Topcliffe saw his moment. He raised a troop of 30 horsemen at his own expense to help crush the rebellion, and from that act of loyalty, he fashioned an identity that would define him for life. England's tireless protector against Catholic sedition. He was never officially on the payroll of men like Walsingham or Cecil, but he held commissions from the Privy Council that allowed him to operate independently. He was a free agent. This was a dangerous level of freedom for a man who was so convinced of his own righteousness. He set up his headquarters at his house in Westminster, conveniently right next to the Gatehouse Prison. There, prisoners could literally hear him through the walls as he interrogated their comrades. He referred to his assistants as his instruments, a chilling choice of words that hinted at both orchestration and torment. So, this dude didn't just extract confessions, he supervised executions. He made sure that every detail of a traitor's death met the full measure of the law. He was the one who made sure the condemned were cut down only after they had truly suffered. His pride showed even in the margins of the books that he confiscated from Catholics. Beside the names of captured priests, he would jot things like, "I racked him." Sometimes he even drew a little tiny gallows, a grotesque doodle of triumph. By the late 1580s, he had become the face of Elizabethan religious enforcement, a man whose cruelty was not hidden but was paraded around like patriotic zeal. His reputation was built on pain. His methods were infamous even among Elizabeth's own agents. The gauntlets were his favorite, iron cuffs that suspended the victim by the wrists, their body weight wrenching their shoulders from their sockets. If this was done properly, he claimed that it left no lasting mark. If not, it destroyed the body from the inside. He blended physical agony with psychological torment. Prisoners were kept awake for days, forced to listen to false reports designed to break their will. One Jesuit, St. Eustace White, described being hung by his manacles from 8 in the morning until late afternoon while Topcliffe mocked him, pretending Spanish troops had invaded London. "Do you not hear the drums?" he taunted, as parade music for the Lord Mayor echoed outside. There was like something going on for the Lord Mayor, and he said it was Spanish troops invading. His work didn't end in the dungeon. At executions, he was there overseeing every grisly stage of hanging, drawing, and quartering. He made sure placards were posted identifying each victim by name and their supposed crime. This wasn't just justice. This was theater, and Topcliffe was the star, and he loved that. Among his victims were men who would later become Catholic saints, Robert Southwell, others whose writings survive only because they smuggled them out of prison before their deaths. Father John Gerard, who endured his interrogations, called Topcliffe old and hoary, a veteran in evil. His cruelty was methodical, almost administrative, yet always, always personal. He believed that he was the Queen's hand of vengeance, and for a time, she actually allowed him to play that role. And then came the Anne Bellamy affair. 1592, Topcliffe had grown untouchable. His authority was vast. His sense of moral boundaries had completely evaporated. And that year, he turned his attention to Anne Bellamy, a young Catholic woman who was imprisoned in the Gatehouse. Whether by coercion or seduction, she became his victim and she became pregnant. She was terrified, and she was manipulated into betraying the location of Father Robert Southwell, one of England's most wanted Jesuits. Southwell was captured soon afterwards, and he was later executed, another one of Topcliffe's trophies. When Anne later married one of Topcliffe's servants, I wonder how much say she had in that, because that's not weird at all, he attempted to force her father to surrender the family estate to them. Even the Queen knew about the scandal, the pregnancy, the manipulation, the blatant abuse of power, yet nothing happened. The Bellamy family was ruined, and Topcliffe carried on, still boasting of his service to Elizabeth. This guy, This whole thing showed the full measure of his impunity. Even as he acted under the Queen's banner, his service had become self-serving, a private empire built on fear and ruined lives. But karma has a way of coming back. Power never lasts forever, even for those who wield it in the Queen's name. By the late 1590s, his influence began to crumble. He was still useful enough to be called upon sometimes. In 1597, he was asked to investigate The Isle of Dogs, the play by Ben Jonson and Thomas Nash that had offended the authorities, but his sweeping license to hunt and torture had been quietly revoked. His downfall came through greed. It so often does. For years, he had pursued the Catholic Fitzherbert family of Derbyshire, determined to destroy them. In a scheme so audacious it bordered on madness, he persuaded the younger Thomas Fitzherbert to promise him £3,000 if he could ensure the deaths of his own father, uncle, and cousin. When two of the men died in prison, Topcliffe demanded payment. Fitzherbert refused, and Topcliffe, ever confident in his own immunity, sued him in chancery to collect the blood money. So basically, he had said to the younger one, look, I'll take care of your relatives so you could inherit, basically, because he wanted his inheritance. And then they died in prison, and so he wanted to collect his money. And the younger one didn't pay, and so he took him to court. And now, again, this is how history has recorded it. So who knows if the younger Thomas Fitzherbert actually had agreed to that, because that seems pretty demented as well. I don't know. But the Privy Council was appalled. They summoned him, and when he responded with insults, they threw him in prison. Within weeks, Elizabeth released him after he appealed to her directly, a final gesture of royal favor to her aging enforcer, but his reputation never recovered. Under James I, he lost all his lands and his power, and the Fitzherberts were able to reclaim their estate and their money. Robert Topcliffe died in late 1604, around the age of 73. His estate was heavily in debt. His influence was completely gone. Like Walsingham, he had bankrupted himself in service of the crown, though in his case, few ever mourned his passing. In life, he had been one of the most feared men in England. In death, he became a symbol, the dark face of Elizabeth's otherwise golden age. Catholic writers remembered him as a monster. Centuries later, historians and novelists would resurrect him as the embodiment of fanaticism dressed up in loyalty. There was Brian Wilde's cold portrayal in Elizabeth R., Ewan Brenmer's unhinged version in Will, and then the Rory Clements depiction of him as the sadistic nemesis of John Shakespeare, which I've been reading those books. Topcliffe is the personification of cruelty sanctioned by faith and politics. He saw himself as Elizabeth's faithful servant, but history remembers him differently. The man who turned service into sadism and justice into torment. So we will leave it there, my friend. Honestly, if you know anything that's at all redeeming about Robert Topcliffe, leave a comment and let me know, because I'm just not seeing it. But of course, I fully believe that everybody is just out there doing the best that they can with the tools that they have available to them. And I'm sure he didn't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to go be a jerk. Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes out and is like, I'm going to be sadistic and evil and ruin families. So I'm sure he thought he was doing good, but I'm just not seeing it. So if you see it, let me know. I'm interested. I will listen. I'm not super attached to seeing him as a villain. He's been dead for 400 years, so I'm open to opinions. Anyway, if you made it this far in the video and you liked it, I sure would appreciate a press of that like button. You know what it does. It helps to feed that algorithm and help us reach even more people. And I hope that if I don't already have it, I earned your subscription to my channel, where I put out content like this most days of the week. So I realize I don't have a lot of content on villains. Normally, this is the part where I say, if you would like to watch another video on Tudor villains, here it is. And, it pops up and it's like magic. And so I was going through all of my videos, and I'm shockingly low on villain videos. So I need to do something about that. But if you like the idea of bad boys who aren't quite villains, here's a video on the worst bad boys in Tudor England. This is very, very old, before most of you found me. So you might like to go back and revisit that. Here's a video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. Remember, my friend, you are deeply loved. I am so glad I share the planet with you. You make the world a better place, and I'm grateful we got to spend this time together talking about Tudor England. I will be back very, very soon. In the meantime, don't forget to drink your water.